Okay, so today I wanted to talk about what I've just called the rule of threes. I called it the rule of threes simply because I don't know what else to call it. But the idea is that so many aspects of training and so many aspects of life, etc., come in threes. So I wanted to discuss some of those today. And, obviously you can see I'm sitting down in front of my original Van Gogh. If it was, I'd be very happy, but it's not. But anyway, and I wanted to go through some of these. Us, Mike. Last week we mentioned Mike's book. Funnily enough, he turns up right when I'm about to talk about it. But we talked about Mike's book, Hojo Undo, and I put a link. That's the book, Hojo Undo, right there. And I remember to grab it today because one of the group of threes, of course, is Shin-Gi-Tai, which is another great book from Mike Clarke. Us, George, good to see you, man. Yep, great books. So anyway, I did a link, and if I'm just I put it on in the comments, or I put it in the information of that last week's live video. So if you wanted to go and grab it and have a look, feel free to do so. Okay, so let's go through some of these rules of three. And the thing to remember too is they're pretty well everywhere. They're not just in the martial arts. The Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost is probably the best known rule of three. And our body is a body of physical, mental, and spiritual nature. But I mentioned too in my book, Sosai's Principles of Kata Training. If you have my book, well, then it's on page 207. And there's a whole section, pages and pages, of going into depth about that. But first of all, there's the waza no kankyu, which refers to the tempo of technique. Chikara no kyojaku, which means that I interpreted that as the points of power stress. Sometimes you've got to go with it and soft, and sometimes you've just got to smash it hard. And iki no chosei, or the breath control. Waza no kankyu too is very interesting. When I thought about that a lot, waza no kankyu, the timing of the tempo, or the tempo of the technique is also connected to the timing of your technique in relation to the timing of someone else's technique. Well, I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But those 3 points of Sosai's kata training, so waza no kankyu, chikara no kyojaku, iki no chosei, or the tempo technique, points of power stress, and breath control, are very intimately connected to Funakoshi Gichin's 3 cardinal points, as spoken about in his book Karate do Kyohan. And the third, I just wrote in my book anyway, the 3 cardinal. He describes the first principle as what waza no kankyu, or the tempo techniques. He calls it fast and slow movements in techniques. The second as light and heavy application of strength. So that's chikara no kyojaku, which I call the points of power stress. He described them, or rather the translator of his book Karate do Kyohan, which I believe was Oshimatsutomu, who actually celebrated his one of Funakoshi Gichin's students. My sister is one of his black belts, and Oshimatsutomu celebrated his 80th birthday just a few days ago. So happy birthday to Oshima Sensei, who was hugely influential in the introduction of Shotokan in the west coast of America. But anyway, he was the one that pretty well translated that book. And he described chikara no kyojaku, which I call points of power stress, light and heavy application of strength. And the third one is a different phrase in Japanese, although it relates to breath. And this is why I really loved it, because breath control, okay? So there are certain times, especially when you grapple, if you've ever done any grappling and someone gets certain holds on you, specifically one they call the body lock, where they're on their back and they wrap their legs around and they just squeeze your ribs, it's very, very hard to breathe. Okay, so at times like that, learning how to calm down and control your breathing and breathe. There are certain ways you're taught to breathe when your diaphragm can't move. And so that's very interesting, because in Funakoshi Gichin's book, he describes it as karada no shinshuku. Karada is body, shinshuku is the expansion and contraction. So the expansion and contraction of the body. And Funakoshi explains the application of these principles as follow. Although there are those who in their karate practice apply strength excessively or indiscriminately in rapid motions, application of great strength does not indicate rapid progress in learning. And the use of strength in continuous rapid motions does not mean that one is skilled. Rather, in doing the kata, one must learn to apply strength where it is called for and not otherwise, to move quickly when necessary and to slow down when appropriate. The most important factors underlying proper regulation of strength and speed are the 3 points enumerated here. In a given kata, in order really to appreciate, to apply the points, degree of strength, expansion and contraction of body, and fast and slow movements of a technique correctly, it is necessary that one fully understand the particular features of this kata and the meaning of each technique in it. Okay, so he goes on, only after drinking deeply the significance of these 3 main points will one be able to practice the kata correctly. So he really highlights the importance of those 3 cardinal points, which Sosai calls the sanyoso, or the 3 principles of kata. And there's no mistaking how important he feels that they are. Another one, which is very important, this is why I asked you to bring a notepad. In fact, I might even write it here, Nigiri sannen, tachi sannen, tsuki sannen. Nigiri is the grip, sannen is 3 years. So again, 3 years, 3 principles, 3 years, 9 years. Nigiri sannen. So working on mastering the grip for 3 years. Tachi sannen, or spending 3 years mastering the fundamental stances. And tsuki sannen, working 3 years focused on getting the punch. And Sosai tells a funny story. He's told it. He told it in an interview once that I was interpreting, but he's also told it in other interviews as well, more than once, because I think he really likes the story. It's a nice story, but it also, shows his humility. He talks about when he got his Goju black belt. I think he got his Shotokan black belt when he was 15. Got his first Goju black belt when he was like 18 or something like that. And when he got his black belt, his teacher said he was very strong, but his techniques were immature and that he would get better with time. And Sosai says he was a little bit annoyed. He's going, give us a break. He just smashed everybody in the grading, and he felt like he was already super strong. And then he says, he trained for years and years and years, and even after 50 or 60 years, depends. I've heard him say 50 years, and I've also heard him say 60 years. Maybe it was when the interview was, as time went past. But he said sometimes he just stand there staring at his fist, questioning whether he had actually ever mastered the correct fist. Sosai was told when he was 18 that, your karate's not bad, but it's still a little immature and it'll get better with time. He wasn't too happy, but then he realized through this concept of nigiri sannen, tachi sannen, tsuki sannen, 3 years the grip, 3 years the stance, 3 years the strike, that he realized that even to understand the fundamental proper technique of a strike, it takes 9 years, if you like. So that was very interesting, and a very interesting story when he told it, because he always was very self-effacing and always had a bit of a giggle. And I could tell when the story was coming up, so I kind of got used to, when you hear the same thing over and over, your translation becomes clearer. And it was always a lot of fun translating that for people, because I knew he had a twinkle in his eye. Okay, and then the next one that I want to look at, of course, is Ta-da! Shin-Gi-Tai, Mike's book. But the concept that Mike addressed, and even though the concept had been around forever, Mike was, I'd say, the first one to ever go into very, very serious depth about it in the West in English. So the whole concept, Shin-Gi-Tai, spirit, Shin, kokoro, spirit, Gi or waza, technique, and Tai, karada. Gi is technique and Tai is karada or body. So we've been over this before, but it never hurts to revisit it, because Sosai also spoke at length about these things. And he also said once that, and I wrote it in my book, Sosai said that the Shin portion of the Japanese martial arts originates in India. So that's the yoga breathing and the yoga, the Buddhism comes from India. The Buddhist, and Buddha was a Hindu, just like Jesus was a Jew, but, you know, Christianity was made from his teachings. Well, Gautama Buddha was a Hindu, but his teachings became what was known as Buddhism. So that and Buddhism very strongly influenced every portion of Japanese society. So that originates in India. The gi, or the techniques that we use in the martial arts mostly originate in China. Techniques evolve endlessly. I was watching a video recently. Someone was asking about different leaders and different generations, and it's like it's a moot point. Who was better? Well, you can never say that, and anyone who tries to enter that is a little foolish, simply because the techniques, the mindset, the attitude, the environment, everything was completely different for different eras. The idea of gi from Shin-Gi-Tai, Sosai said, predominantly originates in China, even though technique is ever evolving. And Tai, of course, the Tai portion or karada, Sosai said that karate training and the conditioning principles and techniques that are used in the martial arts is primarily from Japan, especially Okinawa. And if you read that book Hojo Undo, that talks about a lot of the traditional conditioning methods out of Okinawa. There's a very Japanese trait to train the bottom half of the body. You look at the Western concept of power is thin hips and a big V, but the Japanese concept of power is thick legs, stocky legs, strong back, like that, and strong core. And so it's a very different approach to it. Even Funakoshi Gichin said the ultimate aim of the art of karate is perfection of the character of participants. Got nothing to do with who's stronger and harder and all this sort of thing. The triune balance is mastery, the physical, mental, and spiritual. And the ultimate goal, like that, so many athletes who hit their peak, and then what next? You see that in karate as much as anything else. If you like, so many karate champions have gone on and just got lost with life. Shin, just before I asked about the meaning of the kanji in Kyokushin and how it specifically relates to the ultimate truth, meaning-wise. Well, let me write it for you. Kyoku, ultimate, extreme, ultimate. Shin, the Kyoku Shin, truth. So when you say the meaning of this kanji in Kyokushin and how it specifically relates to the ultimate truth, okay, so that's your answer. The ultimate truth is those two kanji put together, Kyoku Shin, ultimate truth. So that's what that kanji means. Exactly, it means truth. Okay, so Shin-Gi-Tai, like I said, Sosai said that Shin primarily, the spiritual side of Japanese martial arts comes from India. The technical side of Japanese martial arts predominantly comes from China or originates in China. And the physical training aspects of Japanese martial arts originates in Japan itself. Yeah, well, look, Caius, you could probably go down that alley and argue forever, because there are some people who are strictly materialists, who don't believe in an afterlife, who don't have any way to process the idea of a soul, the idea of transmigration from life to life, reincarnation, karma, all this sort of stuff. And then you have people who have just as much intelligence who argue the opposite. So I would actually say that it's a quest for both. When he says the ultimate aim of the art of karate lies in perfection of the character of the participants, well, I don't think there's any mistake that he's talking about the character. And what is character? Well, I would say character is a combination of the physical, spiritual, and mental balance. But at the same time, you're right that Sosai also spoke a lot about the perfection of technique and the endlessness of training. And that's why he used to say that every time he trains, he repeats the same thing over and over and over again until he feels like you get it. Then he said, well, then when you've got it, then I'll stop. But he never stopped. So both, I'd say, Caius, but in terms of Funakoshi Sensei's actual quote, I would say when he says perfection of the character of the participants, he's talking about the spirit side of it. I'm asking out of ignorance here, so please forgive me. Has anyone Kyokushin repeated the solitary mountain training Sosai took? Numerous people have attempted various lengths, and Sosai himself and a number of his students, Mike, over the years would go to the mountains for periods of, I believe, up to about 6 weeks, no more than 6 weeks. But so it would be Sosai, and Sosai would often go back to the mountains with his students for periods of up to about 6 weeks at a time, sometimes a week, sometimes a month, sometimes 6 weeks. Don't forget the guys who were preparing for the match in Thailand against the Thais. They went and trained up in the mountains for quite a long period as well. I'm just flicking through as I'm talking to see if I can find that photo. So yes, Mike, yeah, there's that photo. So see this one here? That photo there. That was actually up in the mountain with these guys, Kurosaki and Iwafumi, I think his name, Iwamura, his name was. They would go up. Iwamura said that they would go up for various periods of up to 6 weeks, maybe even longer. But what he said was interesting. He said that nobody had the indefatigability of Sosai. He would train from morning till night. This is even later on. He's in his 40s at this stage. But his ability to focus, single-pointed focus, and I'll talk about that a little later too, his ability to focus at depth was amazing to everyone. You know, so sometimes people talk, I know there are some people that talk about Kyokushin being created by Sosai and Kurosaki, but that just absolutely wasn't the case. Kurosaki was like right now at my dojo, I have young Ben Ajami, and I say young, he's probably 33, 34. He's been training with me since he was a teenager. And for all intents and purposes, he's the head instructor. So I tell people he's the instructor, and he often refers to the students at the dojo as his students. I have no problem with that whatsoever, because there's no mistake with our relationship. And that could then, people could look at that, and if it was Sosai and Kurosaki, they go, well, they created Kyokushin together. Kurosaki wasn't even around when Sosai created Kyokushin. He came to Kyokushin when Sosai started it, that's for sure. Sorry. Yeah, good question about solo training. I have heard of people over time who have done short bursts of it, short periods, never any for any length of time, that's for sure. And if they had, then there's nothing spoken about it too much that I'm aware of. I think that probably also leads to two things. One is some people doubt whether Sosai did it, but there's ample material evidence and witnesses and so on to show that did happen. And the other thing too was people that I've spoken to, like Iwamura Sensei and so on, who are just in awe of Sosai's. Even Oishi Shihan said they're in awe of Sosai's ability to focus and train hard consistently for long periods of time. They say that was his strength. He wasn't particularly gifted. He wasn't especially big or anything like that. A lot of great successful martial artists have particularly extraordinary attributes. Sosai didn't. But what he did have was this incredible, indefatigable will to train. And will is everything, Will lets you pick the pen up. Will lets you hit a hammer on a nail and take 50 hits to get it in, or hit it and get it in with 2 hits. That's just a facet of willpower. And Sosai, above all else, had this amazing willpower, I think. Why does Sosai choose those kanji? That's a whole story in itself, actually. We can talk about another time, but there is a specific reason for it. But they're very beautiful kanji. There's no doubt about it. The ultimate truth. Well, the good thing is, Kylie, you're never going to catch up to someone who's 20 years older. But I think you're pretty exceptional for your age. You still train hard and you still run classes every day, and you're still doing things like you're in your mid-20s. So that's the only way to hold age at bay temporarily. You're never going to hold it at bay permanently. Also, for me, another ideal training thing is the 3-month cycle. I think that 3-month cycle is really, really valuable, where you have 3 4-week lots and a week of review. And our tournament peaking program, which has proved extremely successful over the years, which we've kind of kept to ourselves because everyone has their own peaking program. Knock yourself out if it works, great. But I remember when we first introduced it to Gary and Wally, and then anyone who came along and trained in the Uchideshi, and they're always a little bit skeptical about the peaking program that I developed. But 100% of the time, they would go into the fight and come out of the fight saying, man, I just felt better in that fight than I've ever felt before. I even used it with a few. I had, from time to time, I get kickboxers who'd want me to help them prepare for fight. But our peaking program is a 3-month peaking program. Our training cycles, our training micro cycles, our macro cycles are 3 months, which are 3 blocks of 4 weeks and 1 rest and review week. Now, this is probably the main central reason why I wanted to talk about the rule of 3s today, is because right now I'm doing a bit of an in-depth review of Miyamoto Musashi and his Book of 5 Rings. I've gone back, I've found the original Japanese text, and I'm reading through the Japanese and comparing it through to some of the current English translations, and some of the translations are outstanding, some aren't so outstanding. Many concepts that are used in the martial arts today have a lot of strong influence from the Book of 5 Rings of Musashi. The Book of 5 Rings is an English translation. He didn't call it that. I think he called it Heiho, which is the Book of Strategy, and just happened to have been the same name as the Art of War, which is an English translation, a very nice poetic English translation of the book, that Chinese book, which was also in Chinese, the same kanji that Musashi used to describe his book. If you haven't read that book, it's really worth looking into. I've been reading. I first got a copy in 1976 when Victor Harris wrote his, I think, in 74, and I picked up a hardbound version in Japan when I was living there in 76. And to be quite honest, I'm a little ashamed to say that I'd read it a number of times, never from cover to cover. I read it from cover to cover to once. It didn't make a lot of sense to me because I was wondering how I can relate, sword cuts to karate. I was still very immature in my understanding. Maybe I still am. You see, you don't know what you don't know. But anyway, it took me years before I finally started to look at that with more depth. There are certain things I pulled out of it all the time. One of the things that I always used from it was where he says you got to learn to see far away things close up and close up things as far away. And I always use that as a reference to why it's very, very valuable to listen to your corner man. So when you're fighting a tournament or a match, you have a corner man there. And your corner man is the only person you should listen to because they know you and they know what's going on and they can see things that you can't see simply because you're so close and you're caught up in the things. But they're back and they're able to see things from a distance. So that the corner man and your vision close up are very, very important. But anyway, Musashi points out that technically there are only 3 ways to attack. He just says, look, there's this way, this way, this way. Nothing else exists. Whether you like it or not, you can give names to all kinds of things. There are only 3 ways to attack. And he describes those 3 ways. And first of all, there is taking the initiative and attacking first. Secondly, there is counterfighting. So as he attacks, you come back and counterfight. And thirdly, there is the simultaneous, which can be, you can take that simultaneous even more into depth, even more deeply, because there is that level of where you perceive their thought. That's another level again. I remember years ago when I had a dojo in Brisbane, the Queensland Kendo Society trained at the dojo as well. And they had Nakakura Sensei come along and they had a special seminar. So they actually when I moved out, I had a beautiful dojo and they were looking for a good floor, sprung floor that they could work on. And they rented my hall. And they had a gentleman named Nakakura Sensei who was a 10th Dan. He passed away. I think he was in his 70s then. But he was fighting Australian champions and he'd just stand there and you'd watch what he'd do and you had no idea of how. It was like he was just walking through them. He never seemed fast. He just seemed to have perfect timing and he knew what they were doing for them. He'd just go boom. And he could see the intent of their technique, read their heart, as they say, before they knew it. Let me go over here. We just over there. As part of your training tournaments, do you stress strict diet to your students? Well, one man's meat's another man's poison. We had fairly strict diet in the dormitory. There was no red meat, no pork, no beef, no lamb. They could eat chicken and fish. That's all. And then when it came to tournaments, we had very strict dietary protocols. Would you believe right up to, like, I won't even talk about what it was, but there's nothing illegal and definitely nothing dodgy. It was just ways to optimize the metabolism of the body so that when they walked onto the mat, they would peak right there and then. And they would be doing things with their diet. Nothing, like I said, I abhor performance-enhancing drugs, so don't get me wrong. They're the most challenging, the most potent performance-enhancing drug I ever took was a coffee before a marathon. I have no time for people who use drugs and then try to convince the world that what they achieved was achieved alone without the drugs. You watch some of these Olympics and you just roll your eyes. Okay, yes, so we had strict diet and also strict timing of certain things, but we had a certain freedom with what they would eat. Colton, no Kyokushin near me, we train in a style that's full contact and we train very similar to you guys. May respect you all. Love your videos. Good on you, Colton. Where are you? Where do you train? Thanks for coming along. Appreciate that. Keep up the good work. But listen to him without looking away from your opponent. Yes. Are you saying that because of what we've spoken about before? Because in my dojo, we have a rule. If I was to say your name, if I was to go, Us Pat, and you look at me, you're down for 50 push-ups. So I go around, sometimes we just play it while they're doing kumite. I'll talk to them. And if they look away, if they look towards me, they get 50 push-ups. And so sometimes I'll deliberately work it. I'll go, okay, we got that sorted. James, what do you think? And he'll look at me at 50 push-ups. So you learn to listen. Like Benny the Jet says, listening creates reflex. You learn to listen to your corner man whilst you remain focused on your opponent. That's a fair point. I don't know if you brought that up because it's, yes, I'm wondering whether we'd spoken about it, but maybe not. Greetings, Us, Black Dragon Kemper. Thanks for coming. Appreciate that. Why no red meat? Well, that's just a personal thing. You know, like I said, one man's meat's another man's poison. I tend to think that red meat is completely superfluous. We'll do a whole session on that if you like, but the human digestive system is not a meat eater system. It's a herbivore system, and a herbivore is an organism that eats both fruit and vegetables and nuts off the tree, roots, things like that. There isn't anything that you can't get through a non-meat diet. But having said that, I've had long periods of being a total vegetarian, and then when I moved to Thursday on, I started to eat seafood. My mate Mutti, I've spoken about Mutti. I remember I used to get a big box of nuts and oats and grains and all this, you know, lentils and things for my diet when I lived at Thursday Island. And I remember one day I was there opening the box and Mutti was with me. You remember? Yeah, I remember Mutti was with me, and I opened it up and he shook his head. And these guys, the islanders, they're like, their diet is predominantly meat because they have no alternative. They don't get a lot of vegetables, you know, and so their body's adapted to a predominantly meat diet. But he looked at my food, he looked at me and went, huh? I know Savi. He said, I don't understand. I know Savi how man can live on birdseed. Just looked at my box of seeds and grains and nuts. He just shook his head. Couldn't believe it. But anyway, so Marco, I haven't eaten red meat since I was 19. And I don't feel I've missed anything. If anything, the danger is people cut out red meat and they don't change their diet properly. It's easier for me because I eat chicken and fish. My wife, not never, but I prefer fish. But my wife cooks chicken for me, even though she'll eat. She might have beef. We'll go out to a restaurant or something. She'll have beef, but I won't. So it's a very personal thing. But I don't think the human body needs red meat. It's very, very, in my opinion, it's very acidic, and there are more benefits to not eating it than eating it. Having said that, if your culture and history and family expect you to eat red meat, I would eat it. And I've been to people's houses. I've been invited over to twice it's happened, invited to someone's house, and didn't tell them that I don't eat. I thought they knew, they didn't. And the wife cooked up a beautiful serving of spaghetti bolognese, and I just ate it and just left it at that. You're better off eating it and letting the body deal with it than you are creating this big, oh no, I can't eat it, I'm a vegetarian. I never do that to people. You know, even my children, growing up, I brought my kids up on predominantly fish and chicken, probably to the point where they got sick of it. But what I also did was every now and then I would cook them lamb chops, or I would cook them a beef steak, so that they would grow up having experienced it, so later on in life they can make a decision. And my son, who's now in his 20s, he eats meat. My daughter, who's also in her 20s, doesn't. So each to his own. It's that simple. Turkish Delight chocolate bar an hour before training. Yep, I agree with you, Paul. Good on you. Good. I'm lucky I'm deaf, as I go down for lots of push-ups. Alan trains with me, guys. Chicken is allowed because it's leaner. Well, yes, also, yeah, there's that too. The fat is different. I think. I just think the red meat it's far more acidic. But I mean, ultimately, I didn't even eat chicken for a long time. I just think for me, chicken is a convenience thing. When I brought my kids up, it was much easier to bring the kids up and prepare. Remember, I was a single dad, so I had to prepare them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if I didn't cook them meat, preparing proper vegetarian meals just takes that little bit longer, a little bit more preparation, a little bit more work, and I just wasn't prepared to do that. So it was easy just to cook them fish one day, chicken the next, and like I said, once a month we'd throw in a lamb chop or a steak and so on. But yeah, so we could talk about that, Marco, another time. I'm more than happy to discuss it. I've got no problem at all. Utah, good on you. So I shot in you, which emphasizes full contact. Way different over shot in. Yes, well, shot in you, has great history. Probably one of the oldest styles in America, I think. But anyway, so Musashi's 5 rings. In Victor Harris's book, he translated as the 3 methods to forestall the enemy. I'm just opening my old copy here. 3 methods to forestall the enemy. That doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but so probably I would call it the 3 initiatives, because they're something sen, something no sen. And sen, the sen part of it literally means it's like sensei. It literally means going before, or the future, or a priority. So in that respect, it means taking the initiative in one way or another. So the 3, I've just run right out of time, haven't I? I'm so sorry. The first of the 3 methods of initiative is what Musashi called ken no sen. Ken no sen. And the word for that's, I did it. I wasn't going to have time to do it, but that's ken no sen. Very, very involved kanji. It's not really. It's, makes sense when you realize there's different parts of the kanji, and the kanjis are made up of different parts. There's that part, there's that part, and there's that part. And they make the kanji up. But that particular kanji has the connotation of like taking the initiative or going for it. Like when you say to someone, train really hard, ishokenmei gambatte, ishokenmei gambaru. When you say, I'm really going to try hard and really, really go for it, that's the kanji. So what that means is it's basically taking the initiative and attacking without waiting for the opponent to move. The next one is tai no sen. And it's not, even though Shin-Gi-Tai, body, people get it confused. It's not that tai. It's the tai for waiting. So this is the kanji for waiting. In Japanese, you say matsu. Japanese kanji often have 2 or more readings, and this is matsu, as in to wait. Okay, so it means, another way to say it is tai. So it means the initiative of waiting. So in other words, counterfighting. It means you wait for the opponent to attack, and then you time it to counterfight them. The third one is tai no sen. Now this one is more connected to the body. Often it's the tai that they use. This is the tai. That's the old way of writing the kanji for the body. There's part of it. There's part of it. That kind of like means the bones and sinews, and that means an abundance of. So the body is an abundance of bone and sinews. See, the kanji are made up of these sections. And tai no sen, you write it twice. When you write a kanji twice, you just do that. It just means the same thing twice. So this one kind of means another trend. I'm just, where's my Zen brush? I'm going to write another kanji for tai as well. There's another kanji for tai, which is roughly that. I should be more conscientious. 1. So this is another Tai, and this kind of means equal. So when, or it means versus, as in him versus him. That's very, you look at the Olympics all the time and you've got two teams playing, Japan versus Australia, Nippon, Tai, Australia. Okay, so that use of this kanji is quite often, that's how they'll write it. They'll write it Tai Tai no Sen, using that kanji, where they actually, I'm just going to write it quickly here. I didn't even fit it on the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Roughly like, basically it's that kanji repeated twice. So it kind of gives you the impression of simultaneous attack. It's him versus him. Tai Tai versus, bang. They meet together and it's simultaneous. So Musashi says these are the only three ways you can attack. You take the initiative, attack first, you counter fight, or you attack at the same time. There is another deeper level too, where they, where they talk about, these have been translated into modern karate. They use the term sen no sen, which means sen as in sensei. Sen no sen means taking the initiative. And then go no sen, go is ushiro, back stance. Kokutsu dachi, the kanji for kokutsu is the same as go no sen, which means after. So that's a counter attack. And then you have tai no sen, which is using that kanji that I just showed you for I'll use my finger, for simultaneous. There's no real point. Enough of the kanji. Okay, so that's simultaneous. So they're translated to help people understand Musashi's descriptions, just to make it a little clearer, because Musashi was writing 400 years ago, so obviously 450 years ago, so obviously the language he used is a little bit different as well. So they've been translated into those sen no sen, go no sen, tai no sen, which is a little bit different to Musashi's version, which is ken no sen, tai no sen, and tai tai no sen. Is this getting a little bit crazy? But it's very, very simple, and I'd be more than happy. In fact, I'm sending, by the way, if you're not, I forget to do this every time. If you're not a member of the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you know when stuff's coming out, and leave a comment and leave a like if you like. But most importantly, to help me grow it, just pass it on to your friends. If you think there's anything worthwhile here, then mention it to your friends, because the more people that come, the more I can grow the channel. But for Patreon people, thank you. As always, your generosity and thoughtfulness is out of this world, and it's allowing me to do things I would not have been able to do otherwise. And I'm preparing you now a special 8-page booklet, and I'm going to include a lot of this information in that. Okay. Another thing about the 3 points of taking the initiative, simultaneous or counterfighting, is that a lot of that can be connected, I find anyway. You can look at it in terms of the 7 stages of kumite, where I talk about stage 7 is where you've got this mushin, this mind without mind, and this presence. And sometimes in kumite, when you still haven't got to that, what happens is you'll be sparring someone and you're totally finding yourself in their rhythm and their timing. And in that respect, then your whole timing, your initiative, is that concept of simultaneous or counter fighting. The best you get is simultaneous. But if you want to take the initiative and take control, then you have to change the rhythm and the energy of the round of kumite to your rhythm and your timing. And you'll know that when you're sparring, sometimes even if you're green belt, brown belt, showdown, knee down, sometimes you're sparring someone who's junior to you, you totally control and dominate the timing and the flow. But when you're sparring someone who's better than you, they dominate and control the energy and flow, and you find your timing changes. And I think that's really worth talking about too. Also, another triune part of our nature, our own nature. We are physical, mental, and spiritual beings. I'm I know some people would argue there's very little to do with spiritual. Well, that's okay. They'll work it out one day. I hope that didn't sound patronizing. It's not. Some of the most intelligent people in the world think that before we're here, there's nothing, and after we're here, there's nothing. I just can't work that out. It's just not in my head. Also, we talk about the whole, I would suggest that the whole nature of religion is an organized attempt to relieve people of suffering. So every prophet who comes along has a solution to alleviate suffering, pain and suffering. You've got the physical suffering of pain, old age, disease. You've got the mental suffering of regrets of the past and fears of the future. And you've got the spiritual suffering of the spiritual ignorance of not understanding the spiritual nature. And that's a threefold nature too. So suffering is threefold, but our nature is threefold. We're physical, mental, and spiritual beings as well, And also, if you look at my book, you may remember early on in the book, I talk about the triguna. See this section here, page 129, I think it is. Is that right? 129. The three qualities which you got Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. The three qualities. Man's consciousness is various levels of those all mixed up in together. And I think that's very, very intelligent. And another thing too is the states of consciousness, and these are very intimately related to the angle of your eyes. It's very interesting. When you're conscious, your eyes are straight ahead. So when you're talking to someone or anything like that, you might be looking down, but that's a different thing. When you're conscious, your eyes are straight ahead. When you're in subconscious, your eyes drop down. So sometimes when you're contemplating something through your subconscious, you drop your eyes down. When you meditate deeply and you want to go into the superconscious, then your eyes go up. And the interesting thing is, it's physically impossible for a human being to fall asleep if their eyes are elevated. And you see pictures of saints and so on at the time of their death, or someone, they're looking up like this. And often people think they're just looking up towards heaven, but actually it's a representation of their consciousness going into super consciousness. I know when you meditate, you lift your eyes up, you can't fall asleep. The catch is when you get tired, the eyes drop and then you fall asleep. I think that's kind of funny. And you have the three states of consciousness as well. So we have conscious, subconscious, superconscious, but we also have the waking state, the deep sleep state, and the dream state. And I always have a little bit of a joke about that, because sometimes when you're sparring with someone out of the league, you go through all three of these. At first you think you can take him, and your friends tell you that you're dreaming, and then you're sparring, and then you're asleep. You don't realize it because you didn't see the kick. And then later on, you wake up again and you realize that, what was I thinking? That was a bit silly. So you see, these are just, I hope you enjoy that little look, particularly the look at Musashi's book. Go through Musashi's 5 Rings. You could probably download it online. And in particular, the Book of Fire, where he talks about these 3 initiatives, or these 3 methods of forestalling the enemy. And he goes into a little depth. Now, in terms of 80-20, when you think about it, I think that's very interesting to bring it down to those 3 options. You either take the initiative, you counterfight, or you simultaneous. If you know that they're the only 3 things, well, then that allows you very, very clearly and easily to narrow down your approach to fighting and how you'll go about it, and I think that is very, very useful. I know in grappling, for example, when we grapple, it's even easier than that, because everything happens in slow motion. Just got to get your grip. You get your grip. If you can't get your grip, you go back to defense. You're defending, you go for the grip again. Once you get your grip, you take them to the ground. When you take them to the ground, you're in a certain position. From that position, you get your grips. You get your grip, you're looking for the sub. You make sure your balance is under control. If you can't find the sub, you get your grips even better. You get your balance even better. You put pressure down even better. And it's much easier to process in grappling, because it happens at a much slower pace. But if you can narrow down those options, it gives you such clarity. And it's much easier if you think going into a fight, what can happen? 10,000 things can happen. Well, actually, I know only 3 things can happen. I either take the initiative, he either takes the initiative, in which case I counterfight, or I get the timing right and I simultaneously take the initiative. And then your training can work around those. So anyway, I'll leave it there. I think that's enough. Urs, thank you very much for coming along once again. The chat went kind of silent. I'm wondering, is everyone still here? The chat stopped after Colton put a comment about Utah. I had no more chats. Is anyone still there? Or am I talking to myself for the last 20 minutes? But anyway, thank you very much. I'll wind it up there and end the stream. I appreciate your presence, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Us. It looks like, is that what happened? Did the live stream go? Oh, it did. Yeah, look at that. Still there. I just popped it up. Okay, from Utah. Marco, that all-meat diet craze seems crazy. Yeah, I can't work it out. I'm sorry. Look, I just noticed the chat was going and it had stopped at Colton's comment about being from Utah. Yeah, the all-meat diet craze. But then, then you got people like that Canadian professor who wrote that fantastic book. He has problems with his body, so he can only really survive on a meat diet. So that's interesting. Sounds like a rocky road to me. Yep, good. Yeah, look, we can talk about it, Marco. If you remind me, I'm more than happy to do a session on what I consider to be my opinions about diet. But yeah, by all means. Yeah, I've looked into the Stoics, Caius. I know they're on a bit of a wave at the moment, but I looked at them when I was much younger, and I found them to be quite profound. There's no doubt about it. In fact, I've got quotes from some of the Stoics on my wall even today. But, I found a different path, and I found that path was pretty profoundly complete. So I just didn't go back to the Stoics. But I know the Stoics are going through they're on a bit of a wave at the moment, probably initiated by Tim Ferriss, who's had a lot of influence in a lot of the way people think. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. The Stoics have a lot to offer. I think it also comes with age. I think the question hangs more on whether or not there is consciousness after death and if it's related to our present consciousness. Yeah, I could talk about that forever too, Mike. There is a thread of consciousness, put it that way. The only, well, if you like, an analogy you use for death is that, you get a new car and the car's fantastic and it's new and boom, and one day it wears out, you sell it, get a new car. But you haven't changed. Your nature hasn't changed. Well, the journey from life to life, in my understanding, is a little bit like that the soul, which we really are, it's a matter of identification. Are we a body with a soul, or are we a soul that has a body temporarily, and when it's worn out, we get another one, like we get a new car, until we finally get to our destination. And then we don't have to go out and get another car anymore. It's a little bit like that. And anyway, we can go on and on and on. It's related to our consciousness because, again, another threefold thing we didn't talk about is the threefold nature of man. We have a physical, astral, and causal nature. And the physical's gone, but the astral is where our sum total of our thoughts are deposited, and that's what encourages us to be reborn again. Anyway, that's a whole new kettle of fish there. Yeah, and where were we formed? Look, in India, they say that at the moment of conception, there's a a mini battle in the astral for souls to get into that particular circumstance, because each one's circumstance is different, and when you're reborn into a karmic circumstance which suits you most. So sometimes you'll see a circumstance which you really want to get into, and there's a little bit of a battle, and someone wins that battle. Look, we could go on, but I could talk about that forever and a day, and I'm more than happy to. In fact, we might do a session on karma and reincarnation if you want. I'm more than happy to do that. Let's keep going down. Thanks, Mike. Erin Dinger, thank you. Good. George, thanks, everyone. Yeah, I didn't realize you're still here. I thought I was talking away. You guys have been chatting without me. Yeah, good on you. That's great. Jordan Peterson, he's the one. I can't believe I forgot his name because I was looking at his book today. Jordan Peterson has digestive problems. So he eats a whole meat diet, and he seems to be pretty healthy. Eskimos live on whale blubber, and the Maasai tribesmen live on goat's milk and cow's blood or something like. Yeah, it's just sometimes there are extremes, but generally speaking, the human condition is that of a herbivore. If you look at the length of the track, the shape of the teeth, the mouth, everything, etc., etc. We could go on, couldn't we? But anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate you coming. Went over time. Thank you for coming along, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.